Brother Eric John Phelps with you live and direct. And Brother George, are you with me now?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Having a little problem this morning, so I trust it's solved. And Brother George, welcome to the broadcast with me, Eric John Phelps, today on this beautiful Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023, as we come live and direct from Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, the bustling metropolis here with one stoplight. So, Brother George, I want to welcome you to the broadcast. You are our most learned and erudite student of history with regard to things concerning the Jesuit order and the empire that they command today and have commanded since March 9th, 1933, when they started their New World Order in the District of Columbia with their Proclamation 2039, 2040, and their Emergency Banking Relief Act. Remember, District of Columbia is the heart and soul of the Jesuit order's New World Order. That's why they put it on the $1 bill. That's why they have Novus Ordo Seclorum. And hence the heart of Satan's political empire is in District of Columbia, aided and abetted by New York. So, Brother George, welcome to the broadcast today. It's so good to have you.
Well, thank you. As always, brother, it's a pleasure to be on with you.
You always teach me something, and I really appreciate it because, it takes work to dig out these facts and relate them to the Counter-Reformation or the Reformation, and it's something that the people need to know about, as this is the key to understanding true history. So, Brother George, why don't you go ahead and take it away for your presentation today?
Okay, thank you. My scripture verse is Ezekiel 33. First say 6 or 7 verses. Ezekiel 33. And, okay, I hope that's not an ominous number. Turns out, again, the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak unto the children of thy people, and say unto them, when I bring a sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set for him their watchman, or repeat, and set him there for their watchman. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. And if, when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people, then whoever heareth the sound of the trumpet take warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, the blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, the people be not warned. If the sword come and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will require at the watchman's hand. So thou, son of man, I have set thee a watchman to the house of Israel. Therefore, thou shalt hear the word at my mouth and warn from me. Okay, I can go on. So, the prophet Ezekiel, I looked this up, his days were approximately from 622 BC to 570. So, he lived about 2,600-ish years ago, 2,700-ish years ago, and he was talking about ancient Israel. However, there was a more modern application. Some people, a number of commentators have said, well, the modern watchman on the tower is supposed to be your pastor. He's supposed to warn the flock about the sword coming upon the land. Now, he is talking, Ezekiel is talking, well, literally and figuratively. But it is the job of the pastor to feed the flock spiritually, to read the word of God, to expound it. However, it seems as if most pastors, at least here in the United States, have abdicated the responsibility. They're only supposed to be, for the most part, concerned with just spiritual matters and not temporal. Well, I don't get into politics or to current events, or I don't tell you how to vote or whom to vote for or whatever. Or I might make a general comment like, hey, abortion is probably not a good idea. And I'll just leave it at that. Whereas, okay, at best, most of your pastors, and this is regardless of affiliation or denomination or whatever, are inept. I'll be charitable, but how many of them are actually Freemasons or part of some other secret society, and they're doing this by design?
That's right. Many of them, and of course, We would have not had white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Western civilization had not the preachers denounced the papacy and their political policies, and to resist them with the sword of just defense through the arm of government. So that is virtually unheard of today by the vast majority of ministers or preachers. All they want to do is deal with sound doctrine and maybe denounce certain sin in the government, but never, never advocate a remedy for the way this is today, which is our duty.
Now, forgive me if you will indulge me for just a moment. And by the way, you usually will make the introduction. You say our most beloved erudite and learned George Widger. Well, I agree with all.
Well, you are. I'm glad you remember that, George. I'm glad you remember the introduction. I was wondering if you'd catch on to that. You did. Okay.
Okay. I would agree with all those adjectives except for the beloved, learned, and erudite. But as I was saying, now I was talking mostly about the United States. Now, in places like Europe, places like Germany or historically Lutheran countries, is a different situation. And not to pick on them, basically, in places like Germany, and there's more so in Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Norway, what's the old joke that most Lutherans in those countries go there for three reasons: when they're hatched, when they're matched, and when they're dispatched, i.e. when they're born, when they get married, and when they die.
I got to remember that, George. Hatched, matched, and dispatched. Okay. I got to remember that one, George. That's the first lesson you gave me today. Thank you very much. But that's true. It's very
okay.
True. And they've departed from the Reformation Bible. They've departed from the Luther Bible. Go ahead.
Well, basically, most of your Protestant churches, specifically your Lutheran churches in places like Stockholm or Oslo or wherever, they're basically museums. They have wonderful architecture and artwork, stained glass windows, but they're virtually empty.
Empty and apostate. Yes, sir. So it isn't any wonder why God's bringing in the savage Muslims and blacks into Sweden to decimate the place or drive them into the new rite. It's a judgment of God for their apostasy and sin, just like here. Go ahead.
Okay, so speaking of which, there are a number. I realized we didn't stream for like 2 or 3 weeks. And before I get into my actual presentation, I have some housekeeping to keep. And as I said, we in the broadcast where I give out my email and I say to people, please send me your questions, comments, concerns, or critiques. And people, and I made the mistake of doing that because people have actually done that. I also look at the comments of videos, and it turns out I made a couple of errors in our previous stream. I made one which correlated into or culminated in another error. We're talking about the 2000 film Aaron Brockovich, and I said that the power company in California, PG&E, was sued by a law firm, I guess, in Hinckley, California, and it went to trial, and they lost trial. Actually, the mistake I made was it was an out-of-court settlement. Therefore, PG&E did not have the right of appeal. However, I will say something. This is, I want to say 1993-ish. The movie came out 2000. So.
George, just kind of slow down in your talking, so at least I can get it. Okay, but go ahead.
Okay. So during the 1990s, this law firm represented by Edward Mastery, who got his undergrad and law degree from Loyola Los Angeles.
And what's Loyola Los Angeles, George?
It's Jesuit.
Thank you.
Okay, so they agreed. Pacific Gas and Electric, PG&E, agreed to a $333 million settlement for the citizens of this town called Hinckley. Now, the law firm got something like $133 million. So that means the people in this town got collectively $200 million, and there are about 600 people. So that means individually they got about $3.3 million each. And I realize these numbers are just purely coincidental. So $3.3 million, that may sound like a windfall. Well, however, when you probably have at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of medical bills that your insurance won't pay for, is basically a wash. And if you're crippled,
yes, sir.
okay, if you're crippled, if you can't work, it's academic. You can get all the money in the world, but if you can't function, it doesn't do you any good.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so I just thought I would clear that up. And
well,
of course,
thank you for that correction. I'm sure the listener appreciates it, realizing that we make mistakes from time to time, and when what's pointed out to us, we make our corrections.
okay, so and I was simply going from memory. Turns out my memory is not quite as accurate as I thought it was. Okay, so so proceeding. Now we're talking about apostate Lutherans in Europe, in places like Germany and Sweden, historically Protestant countries. Well, I just wondering, have you ever heard of a German vessel called the Wilhelm Gustloff?
The Wilhelm Gustloff, is that G-U-S-T-A-V?
Well, Gustloff, Gustloff. It was a
L-O-F-F, like, okay. Gustloff.
Okay. So if you okay, you said you're vaguely familiar, but I imagine most of your listeners have probably not heard of this. This was a German troop transport that was converted to civilian use.
Say that again, George. Just say it again real slow so the listeners get it, okay?
Okay, this was a German troop transport that was converted into a civilian transport.
So it was nothing but women and children and older men on this ship, right?
And wounded soldiers.
Soldiers, okay.
Who were being evacuated from Danzig, which is now known as Gdansk in Poland. Danzig was part of Germany, but that's a whole nother conversation altogether.
Yes, it is.
So this vessel, they're not exactly sure how many people were on board, but it was somewhere between 10 and 11,000. And it was sunk by a German, I'm sorry, by a Russian.
So we'll take it slow. 10 or 11,000 wounded soldiers, women and children and older men was on this one ship, right?
Yes. And it was, I guess, heading towards, Hamburg, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. And so that's in the North Sea. That's in the north area of Germany, right?
Correct.
Okay. And Hamburg is absolutely in the north there. I think it's a port of northern Germany.
Correct. So it was sunk by a Russian sub on January the 30th, 1945.
I would add, they absolutely knew it was a civilian transport. They knew it. Go ahead.
Correct. Mm-hmm. So it was the greatest maritime disaster in history. Approximately 9,400 people died.
Now that's 5 times the amount that died on Titanic, approximately.
Correct. Correct.
Yep.
And this is something that is virtually not taught. I mean, I never heard about this in any of my history courses.
Yeah, it's never taught. I remember when I was writing my book and I came across this and I said, oh, Lord, this is the Jesuits destroying these Lutheran people pursuant to the Council of Trent. And because the Jesuits ran the Soviet Union, they ran Stalin, and they ran FDR, as both those criminals worked together. Both the OSS and the NKVD worked together. It was United Intelligence Community, and they knew that that was a civilian ship, and hence the Jesuits would order it to be sunk pursuant to the Council of Trent and the destruction of the Protestant Reformation, the Lutheran Church, out of Germany. That's why it was sunk. Go ahead, George.
And of course, you had to say, I'm not familiar quite as, and German intelligence was probably involved as well.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. The guy that was the head of the Abwehr was involved. Yep.
Okay, so you basically could say, as I said, this was on January 30th, 1945. So you're talking close to 80 years ago. And this was a couple of weeks before the firebombing of Dresden. So you could say this is basically like a warm-up for Dresden, if
Right.
you will.
One's on the sea and one's on the land. Remember, the Knights of Columbus' weapons of war on their seal is a sword for the land and an anchor for the sea. So this was war on land and war on sea against the historic Protestant Lutheran Germans. And Dresden was a Lutheran city. It was the most prosperous, most beautiful city on the Elbe. It had the most extant library in Europe with regard to the Reformation. It was the summer home and place of vacation for the Kaiser. It was the city to firebomb. So they destroyed all these people on a ship, these civilians on a ship, and then they firebombed the civilians and those German soldiers recovering from the Eastern Front in Dresden. Yes, sir. A terrible mass murder of Lutheran Protestants during World War II, the second half of the Second 30 Years' War. Go ahead, George.
Okay, so one of the few survivors was a young boy who later became a fairly prominent U.S. actor. He currently goes by the name Eric Braeden, Braeden, but he was born Hans York Gutekas on April 3rd, 1941. So young Braeden was for almost 5 years old when this took place. I guess he was one of the, I want to say lucky, I say blessed survivors. So you may not know his name, but he was almost typecast at the beginning of his career because he played German soldiers. He specifically said, no, he did not want to play Nazis. He'll play German soldiers, no problem. He was in TV shows like Combat and Rat Patrol. Around about 1969 or 70, he decided to change his name to Braeden because he didn't want to be typecast as German. So he would later go on to be a soap opera star and do other TV things. But he also played John Jacob Astor in the 1997 film Titanic.
Is that right?
So
that's very intriguing. Well, that's intriguing, George.
So yes, indeed. So you had all these episodes where that have been basically disappeared from the history books. Most people have never heard of them, and they say, "Well, in war, bad things happen." Well,
yeah, because
yes.
It disappears from the history books. This is further proof that the Jesuits and their agents, their coadjutors, are the writers of history. One of them being William Shirer, who was the author of The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich. There's not one mention of the Jesuits in that classic work, so to say. They control the history, some say control the narrative, through their Council on Foreign Relations and academia, so you never see the surfacing of the power of the Jesuit order in their war on the peoples of the Reformation. Okay, George?
Yes. So you had the sinking of the Gustloff, but how many of these ships were sunk? What we commonly call during World War II. You've spoken at great lengths about, the Arizona, the Indianapolis, the Bismarck, the Hood, and almost all of them were, military Well, they also were military operation, but they're inside jobs.
That's correct.
And they're basically nothing more than mass murder.
Correct.
And
correct. Mm-hmm.
So you could, and so for what it's worth, the Gustloff was given orders specifically. It did not have, for what it's worth, it did not have an escort. And the captain, I don't recall his name. I go look it up. He was ordered specifically not to zigzag.
Not to zigzag. Just like the captain of the USS Indianapolis was ordered not to zigzag, did not zigzag, and so therefore they blamed him for the Japanese sub that was waiting for him to sink it.
Now, is it possible with the Arizona? I'm sorry, but Indianapolis, there was actually a bomb placed inside of it.
No doubt. I covered this. There were 4 detonations. Yeah. 2 torpedoes shot and 4 detonations. So there's no doubt bombs were in that. Bombs were in the USS Indianapolis, just as there were bombs in the USS Arizona. Yeah, that's that way they detonated from inside the Arizona, but that's why they could never dive the Arizona. It was illegal to dive the USS Arizona for fear of what might really be discovered, how it was imploded or exploded from inside in the magazine.
So yeah, and of course, well, so these are things that people need to know. If you're not going to if you're not going to find this out at your schools or these governmental indoctrination camps, you had to find this out on your own. And the pastors whom I was just referring to earlier, they're not much better.
Yeah, and furthermore, I maintain this is the pastor's job. The pastor's job is to ferret out true history of the past and of his day, so he can properly warn the people that the Lord has made him the overseer of, the shepherd of, so that they can avoid the pitfalls of what the order is planning for them. This is a pastor's job. And unfortunately, they're not doing it because it takes a lot of work.
Okay. Yes, of course, he's concerned, about his here in the United States, he's concerned about his 501c3 status and getting his salary and his pension and his benefits and all that stuff. And this is a job. Well, rather than working, punching a clock, he'd just rather do this cushy little. Okay, he'd rather do this cushy little gig. It takes him time to prepare his little homilies.
I just hate that word. Yeah, you're right, because it's not a calling. When it's a calling, then the Lord calls you to be a preacher of the gospel. Then you can't help it. It's something that's burning within you that you want to do, and you want to point out errors and whatever, as well as praise for those who do good. And he is a public man. Every pastor is a public man. It's like Cromwell said, every Christian man is a public man. We have a responsibility to the secular affairs of life in which we lived, to either uphold them or to resist them.
Okay. Do you mind if I just pull? I have my material that I want to cover, but can you just indulge me for a moment? Can I just share one quick little anecdote?
I always do, George. You always bring something renowned whenever I indulge you. So I'll give you an indulgence. Young son George, go ahead, my son.
Okay, well, you have nobody to blame but yourself.
Okay.
Okay, back in the 1980s, I mentioned this before. I was attending one of these mega churches in Sacramento, California, where I was living, and they have 3 or 4 services, and they draw thousands of people, and it should have been a bad sign, because one of the first time, shortly after I started attending there, they're doing ads for the upcoming Billy Graham crusade, because he was in Sacramento back in October, November 1995. I'm just going from memory here. And they said, oh, he's coming to the Cow Palace, and so we encourage you to go there and invite your family and friends. And
the Cow Palace, I haven't heard that in years.
The Cow Palace is in San Francisco. Cal Expo. That was. I'm sorry, I'm conflating 2 different locations. Cal Expo in Sacramento, California. So right. Billy Graham preached there for a week, November, November 1995, and this mega church in Sacramento say, "Oh yes, Billy Graham is coming to town, and we invite you to go there and invite your family and friends, and we'll be sending counselors there." And I knew who Billy Graham was, but I really didn't know who was. I didn't know about his organization, or that he was a 33rd degree Freemason, all that sort of stuff. And I didn't go because I was busy doing other things. So this pastor at this church that I attended for a while, he had like a top 10 list of things he would talk about that he downloaded from the internet. It was like a comedy routine. You talk about his misadventures on the golf course, and the cute things that one of his grandchildren would say. And he was a nice fellow.
Irrelevant nonsense that no one could care about. Yeah, but go ahead.
Okay, so
magnify the life of the man rather than the message that he has. And of course,
okay,
the message was total compromise. But go ahead.
Okay, so he'd have like a little 15, 20-minute sermonette, and he would have like throw out one or two verses from the NIV out of context to say, see, this is a sermon. But it was usually a pop psychology message like, well, you need to love husbands, you need to love your wives better, and you need to be a good steward of your money. And they usually do, he'd run series that last like 6 or 8 weeks on money management or communication. And so that was useful, but you can just go down to your local bookshop and buy the book.
Right.
And it wasn't really preaching.
Nothing moving, nothing stirring, nothing resounding, nothing from heaven. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, and not to pick on this, I'll just call him Pastor Tick, Harry Tick. I don't want to mention the name of the congregation because you may know people, you have family, or you used to have family in Sacramento. But anyhow, I call this the Holy Church of Fluff and Puff. That was basically what it was.
Holy Church of Froth and Puff. Is that what you said?
The Holy Church of Fluff and Puff.
Froth and Puff. Okay, got it.
Okay, so anyhow, so one of the things he liked talking about was, I guess, you go golfing, and he would talk about clubs and like teeing off and things like that, and it really didn't have any place in a sermon. And he said two of his regular golfing partners were a couple of Irish Catholic priests, and they'd always give each other, they'd always pray before they tee off. And
that's a joke. Mm-hmm.
What's the joke?
The Catholic priests aren't praying to the one true God, that's for sure. Go ahead.
Well, regardless of whom or what they're praying to, I was saying to him, wait a second, why is he golfing and cavorting with these Catholic priests?
Yeah.
And it just dawned on me at the time, like maybe they were giving him instructions.
Could very well be. That's what they did to Thaddeus Stevens. His best friend was a Catholic priest in Lancaster with whom he liked to walk and talk. I quote that in one of my books. So sure, the priests are there to instruct whoever they're with, because they're there on the authority of the Pope. And the Pope is a vicar of Christ and the universal monarch of the world. So he's going to tell you what you're going to do, boy. And if you don't do it, you're going to be removed from office or removed from being the Billy Graham or whatever, unless you do what we tell you to do. So it's very simple.
Okay, so the last straw there, so to speak, if you forgive the cliche, was back in September 1997. Agnes Gangsub Yahoo, better known as Mother Teresa, died. And the following Sunday, he actually spent the entire 10 or 15 minutes or 20 minutes or however long he preached on eulogizing her.
Eulogizing that little tyrant, that little pagan? Great Billy Graham. That doesn't surprise me because he would call the Pope the greatest moral leader in the world. And so to say something as awful and terrible and untrue as that, no wonder he would say that with quote unquote Mother Teresa.
Yes. So just to mention, as I said, we didn't stream for a couple of weeks, and I guess, was it on Friday? So that would have been the 29th. Dianne Feinstein, the senior senator from California, died. And I know
that's right. And I sang the song in The Wizard of Oz. Ding dong, the witch is dead. Witch, oh witch, Feinstein witch. Ding dong, the Feinstein witch is dead. She's gone where the goblins go below. Ho, 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 ho. That's right. That's good old Dianne Feinstein, the witch from California, the Jewish witch, trained by Catholics and serving the Pope her entire life, and was a party not only to the Kennedy assassination, but also the attempted sinking of the USS Liberty because she was so beloved by Lyndon Baines Johnson, that wicked sinner. But go ahead.
Well, so as I said, she died on Friday at the age of 90. And it's interesting, her birthday was the 22nd of June, which is 1933. So that if she was born that infamous year of 1933. What else happened that year? Can't think of anything else. But anyhow, she died right after her, a few months after her 90th birthday. And she was senator from California since 1993 for 30 years. So prior to that, she had been mayor of San Francisco from 1978 to 88. And prior to that, from 1970 to 78, she was on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors.
Now remember, according to Charles Chineke in his great work, 50 Years in the Church of Rome, San Francisco has been in the hands of the Jesuits since about 1850. With the gold rush and the Comstock lode, the Jesuits took it, kept it all, and brought their Irish Catholics over there to lay claim to the Comstock lode. So they've run it since 1850, and so when they put someone out of San Francisco to be a U.S. senator, you know they control them too.
Correct. Now, she went to Sacred Heart Convent High School in San Francisco, where she graduated in 1951. So she was trained.
Here's a Jewess going to school to be trained by Catholics.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the Sacred Heart concept, that is purely Jesuit. So for all intents and purposes, she was trained by the Jesuits.
Yeah, the Jesuits are the authors of this whole Sacred Heart of Jesus nonsense. They came about with that. Go ahead.
Okay, not to sound impertinent. Well, if they're going to talk about the Sacred Heart of Jesus, well, how about the sacred spleen of Jesus or the sacred liver of Jesus?
Yeah, now you're getting controversial, George. I better lay off.
Okay, and people say that Mary is the mother of Jesus. Okay, so and they say that Anne is the mother of Mary. So will that make Anne the grandmother of God?
No. Well, they say Mary is the mother of God. That's the Virgin Mary. But they also say that Anne is the mother of Mary, which where did they get that? Because it's not in the scripture. I was just reading that yesterday. Yeah, it's Roman Catholic fairy tales, okay? It has nothing to do with the Bible, true biblical Christianity. It's Babylonian Nimrodism, Trinity Babylonianism versus the true God, the one triune God in his Christ, who is a racial Hebrew Jewish Israelite of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through David. Amen. Go ahead.
Okay, so when she became senator of so it's just like her career. The Jesuits were basically guiding her career. As I said, 1969, she was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and she took that position in 1970. Well, basically back then, from 1970 to say 2010-ish, in order to be elected to run for any sort of major elected office, this includes Dianne Feinstein, Gavin, his aunt, Nancy Pelosi, fill in the blank, Jerry Brown. You had to have the anointing of Willie Brown. Now, I know we've spoken about Willie before, but he was in the California State Legislature from 1966 to 1996, thereabouts. And then he became mayor of San Francisco from 1996 to 2004. So Willie Brown is a known Prince Hall Freemason. And he, let's just say he's quite the ladies' man. Or at least he was.
Well, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. Well, secret societies and the Jesuits would exalt Catholics, blacks, and Jews to run their empire. And that's exactly what the Klan warned about. That the exaltation of the Catholics, blacks, and Jews, and you see it all throughout Hollywood, all throughout politics, and you don't see one real Protestant or one real Baptist who is Calvinistic to the point, who wants to resist their political power. They've managed to keep all of them out. Go ahead, George.
Well, yes, indeed. So, speaking of the elevation of Catholics, last week, last week, Hall of Fame baseball player Brooks Robinson died. Robinson was born on the 18th of May, 1937, and he died last week. He spent his entire career with the Baltimore Orioles from 1955 to 1977. He was from Little Rock, Arkansas. He grew up Methodist, but in the early 19th.
He's not Jackie Robinson, right?
Brooks Robinson, who was white.
It's Brooks Robinson. He's white, okay, and a Catholic.
Correct. Now, he grew up Methodist, but in the early 1960s, he converted to the Catholic Church after he married his wife. So,
was she a Catholic?
Correct.
Okay. That's why the priests encouraged Catholic women to marry non-Catholic Protestant men to neutralize the Reformation. So that's a tool. It's a weapon that they use. Go ahead.
Yes. Now, interesting you should say that if a Catholic marries a non-Catholic, you can get something called a dispensation from the bishop. However, the proviso is if you have any children, you're supposed to raise them as Catholics.
That's right.
So basically, however, if you're, say, a Methodist or Lutheran or something, if you're marrying a Catholic, I realize, love is blind, but you have to wonder about your salvation. That's why Paul talks about not being unequally yoked in 2 Corinthians 6:14.
That's correct.
So why do I bring up Brooks Robinson other than the fact that he just died and he was a famous Catholic convert? So arguably he was the greatest third baseman of all time. I realize in the grand scheme of things that means nothing. He spent his entire
he can't be the greatest because he's white. There has to be some black or some Hispanic that's better than him. So you're not going along with the rhetoric here of today, but no doubt he was the best. But you can't say that because now you're being racist and prejudiced, George, and I just can't allow that on this broadcast here now, George. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll flagellate myself 50 times and say 20 Hail Marys after the book.
That's right.
Okay.
You need to go to do some penance, George, for that one. There you go.
Now, as I said, so Brooks Robinson was a Catholic convert. And so his cause salam was he had the longest career with one team. Now, he tied the mark with another baseball player from the Boston Red Sox named Carl Yastrzemski, who also spent his 23-season career with the Red Sox. Now, yes, what religious background do you think Yastrzemski is?
Sounds like he's Polish to me. Polish Catholic.
Hey, how'd you know?
Because I've known a lot of skis. I was raised with some Polish people, and there's Sikorsky and other Z's. I have pretty sisters, I remember that. But yeah, they're Polish Catholics. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very Catholic. And the Poles have been a great asset for the papacy in the past to keep the Muslims out of Europe. But yep, the Poles are very Catholic, and when they're saved, they become very, very anti-papacy and love the Lord and preach the truth. Because I went to school with a couple of them. The Bible.
Well, okay. Well, I'm starting to bring up some boring history again. Forgive me. And I need to, as I said, we started out the stream earlier talking about the Gustloff. And I apologize for the years of boring your audience with all this useless history. And I wish we can just talk about fun stuff like sports and entertainment.
We just go out and be with the world and watch all the sports broadcasters exalt their idols, and we're supposed to go right along with it and be enamored with that sin. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, on a serious note, but you're talking about Poland. And it's how should I put this? The Poles if they knew who was responsible for the Warsaw Uprising of 1943, 1944, and stabbing them in the back in 1939, they would turn on the papacy and they would turn on the Jesuits.
Yes, they would.
Now,
yes, they would. When they would see that their great General Sikorsky was murdered by the Jesuits, when his airplane was brought down, when he was flying from Gibraltar to England, I believe. And the one responsible for that was Kim Philby, a British spy that was also a Russian spy at the same time. If they would understand that the Jesuits, using British intelligence and Soviet intelligence, killed their greatest general, they'd have a whole lot to say. A whole lot to do also. Yeah.
Okay, let me, okay, forgive me for doing history again. Okay, 1939, Poland had a population of about 22 million people. By 1945, they had 6 years later, they had a population of about 16 million people. That's a reduction of over 1/4. And
1/4 of the Poles killed. Mm-hmm. And they were their finest men, their best manhood, so that they would carry out their Katyn massacre. The Russians would, the Soviets would, shoot them in the back of the head, put them in mass graves, so that when Poland was given over to Stalin at Yalta and then at the end of World War II, the manhood of Poland had been greatly diminished, facilitating an easier occupation of Stalin and his Jesuits. That's right. That's why Stalin didn't come to their aid in the Warsaw Uprising. Let them get killed by the German army. When they were promised that Stalin's Red Army would come to their aid, he just sat 6 miles away and let them be massacred. Well, that's good Jesuit military maneuvers when you're out to destroy a targeted population of Roman Catholics that love their country more than the Pope. And that was the Poles.
Okay, so we're talking about 80, 85 years ago. So, but let's just talk about now, about another European country. I don't mean to keep playing the whole race card or racial issues, but here is a factoid. In the year 2000, 23 years ago, the Irish Republic was 96% ethnic Irish. Of that 4%, there are almost all other European ethnic groups, Poles and various other places. However, in 2020, 20 years later, that number was reduced to 80% ethnic Irish.
So that means they are breeding out the white Irish people of Ireland and bringing all these blacks in and Muslims in who want to continually copulate and fornicate with the white Irish women, producing mulattoes, pickaninnies, half-breeds that are black, essentially, making Ireland black. And that's the same thing they're doing in every historic white nation, whether it be Protestant or Catholic. As the post-white power structure knows, a race-mixed, miscegenated nation can never, ever successfully resist the white power structure run by the Vatican. Never.
Okay, it's something I mentioned to you before. Now, we're talking about Europe, and since 2020, Canada has been bringing in something like 500,000 non-ethnic Canadians there. Now, in 2020...
I mean non-white, bringing in non-white.
Yes.
People in Canada, yeah. Mm-hmm. You got the Sikhs, you got the Muslims, you got the blacks, you got the Asians, you got the Chinese, and there's only 30 million white Canadians that I know that I last was told in Canada, so it'll be easy to miscegenate them out. But remember, Brother George, this is all a judgment of God on white Protestant nations for departing from him, his Reformation Bible, the AB 1611, and from departing from sound doctrine and for not resisting the papacy, which is a true biblical maxim as championed by Protestant Calvinists and Baptist Calvinists.
Okay, so we're closing in on an hour. And I actually got a request a couple weeks ago from one of your listeners in Kansas, Johnson County, Kansas, which is near Kansas City, about Tom Bolin. I'm going to hold off on...
This is for Brother John. Brother John, this is for you now. Go ahead, George.
sorry for teasing you. However, I'm going to have to hold off on that because would require more time to properly address that. So,
Oh, George. Okay. All right.
so I just want to let you know that, John, I'm not ignoring you. It's just that I probably should have brought it up at the beginning of the broadcast, but I had other material to cover. So we talked tentatively about doing a stream on Friday, and I definitely then or whatever we stream next, I can bring it up. So did you have anything to say regarding Tom Bowling?
I have a bunch to say, but it's yours. Go ahead, George. I mean, we'll save it for Friday.
Okay.
I want to thank Brother John for bringing this to our attention. He calls me periodically and gives me these gems, but I'm glad he called you and told you too. But go ahead, George.
Okay, so and yes, he's given me a few over the years. Anyhow, so also, was it last week or a couple weeks ago, Roger Whittaker died, and you may not know. He was a pop singer in the 60s and 70s. Did most of the covers. Fairly talented. He could play the guitar. He could whistle. Excellent whistler. He was born on the 22nd of March 1936 in Nairobi, Kenya. He was white. His parents were from England. And I couldn't find anything suspicious about him.
Were they missionaries or were they business people or what?
Well, they were. His father ran a grocery store in England. Well, he was having some health issues, so they decided to move to a warmer climate. So that's
when I use the term missionary, I mean evangelist. It's the papacy that uses the term missionary. So I do my best not to use that. That they were evangelists. But go ahead, George. Continue.
So I don't know what religious tradition he was, and I don't know if you're a Freemason or anything like that. But anyhow, as I said, he was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and I guess during the 1950s, he was conscripted into national service, and he served in the Royal Army, and he participated in the Mau Mau suppression.
Yep.
Now,
if our listeners don't know about the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in 1950 or thereabouts, they need to check it out because it was a Jesuit incited black savagery rampage to kill as many white people, particularly white Protestants, as possible. And they killed over 1,000 of them, I believe. But there was a movie made on that, and Sidney Poitier was the leading character. But it's Mau Mau. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I need to look more into that because I was never taught this. They're just like the Gustloff. I never heard about the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in the 1950s. This took place between 1952 and 1960. So that culminated in basically 1962 in Kenya getting its independence from England. So his parents, even though Kenya was no longer a British colony, his parents remained there. And he, in 1989, April 1989, I guess some men broke into his parents' huts. They killed his father instantly with a machete, and they ended up spending something like over 8 hours raping his mom.
Of course, that's what the black savages love to do. They just love that white vagina. They live for it. And so that's what they do in South Africa, the same exact thing. That's how they killed Eugene Terreblanc, who was a leader in South Africa, wanted to have a separate white nation there in South Africa. And so they broke into his house. They killed him with a machete. They pulled his pants down. They masturbated. They ejaculated their semen all over his penis and left him. That's what those black savages did to Eugene Terreblanc. And probably they did something similar to this gentleman that this white gentleman you're talking about. That's why you have to have racial separation under nationhood, so those wicked things don't happen anymore.
So, but you see, this is something. It wasn't Michael Savage, Michael Medved. So I know he's completely controlled opposition, but he said this was about 10 years ago. He said if you look at post-colonial Africa and other countries, specifically in Africa, countries that were ran by the British, such as Kenya and Tanzania, tend to have a much higher standard of living than countries run by, say, France or Belgium or places like that.
Which were Catholic countries. So we always distinguish between the white Catholic countries versus the white Protestant countries. And you're absolutely right. Kenya had a higher standard of living, a longer lifespan. They've tremendously degenerated under their black military dictators run by the white power structure. So Savage is right about that. He just doesn't make the religious connection.
Well, actually, it was Michael Medved.
Well, Michael Medved. Oh, pardon me.
Okay, so yes, I get them confused myself. Now, it's interesting. Now, as I said last Friday, Dianne Feinstein died at the age of 90. I guess yesterday, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, or rather, I prefer to call him the Emperor of California. He appointed his Diane's replacement.
Well, he is. He's the commander-in-chief. Every state's governor is, in fact, a commander-in-chief ruling the state with a military government. He is Emperor George, so we're absolutely right to call him Emperor Newsom. Go ahead.
Okay.
We have a few more minutes first, so go ahead and you might want to make your conclusions.
Okay, so he appointed Diane's replacement with a black lesbian woman from Maryland.
Oh, goody, we're going to be delivered now. We have a black woman that's a lesbian, and she'll govern us, okay? Get rid of all those white boys. Yeah, great. Go ahead, George.
Okay. So LaFonza Butler is a black lesbian who was born in 1978 or 79. I don't have her exact birthday. So she's at least 44 years old. As I said, she doesn't actually live in California. Well, she does have a California residence. I think she might own a tool shed here or something like that, but her physical address is actually in Maryland.
So she doesn't live in California. That's great. So we now have a foreigner that's a U.S. senator, foreigner from the country of California, going to represent California as a senator in Washington. See why I always say, George, you got to declare independence from Washington? That has to be done. Go ahead.
Okay, they pulled a similar trick with Hillary Clinton back in 2000. I think she might own something like I don't know, a bungalow somewhere in New York State to technically become a New York citizen. But she's from Illinois originally. So that is how she became senator from New York. So this is something that they've been doing for centuries. They bring in.
They've been doing this in this country for the last 90 years or so. But one of the greatest blights any country can have is being governed by someone who's not a native of your land. And that's why the Constitution is very clear that the president must be a native, natural-born citizen of the United States. You have Joseph Stalin that ruled Russia. He wasn't Russian. He was a Georgian. You have Hitler that ruled Germany. He wasn't a German. He was an Austrian. And so whenever you bring in these foreigners to govern your country, they're always going to be tyrants, and they don't care about the people they govern, just like this black witch doesn't care about the people in California that she governs now.
Well, yes, and of course, they, I mean, at least Dianne Feinstein was born in San Francisco. So she had, some sort of affiliation with this state. Now, and
at least she's a domestic traitor. She's a natural-born traitor to California. This traitor is not a natural-born traitor to California.
Okay, this is not an observation, but this is more of a rant. Then there's the whole John Fetterman situation, the junior senator from Pennsylvania.
For that rigged election here, because nobody that I know voted for that guy.
Okay, so how do they describe John Fetterman? He's a train wreck that never left the station. He makes me. Will they also say? Well, one of the things I like about him is he makes me look like a sharp dresser.
Yeah, I think he said recently he doesn't feel like he's competent to govern anymore. I think I read a quotation recently about that.
Oh, okay. Well, so all he has to do is just do what the Jesuits tell him to. Here, John, sign this.
Yeah, that's right. That's just like Biden. That's just like Trump. They're all doing what the Jesuits tell them to do. If they don't, they're not going to be in office very long.
And however, the issue I have with John Fetterman, at least it's just like I know you've been talking about this for years. but I guess he got your memo and decided to throw it in the trash. He said he looks like. I mean, if I ever see him on the street, I'd be tempted to give him $5. Said, "Hey, here, can I buy you something?" He Now I realize I'm not. I know you're not a big fan of suit and ties, and I'm not either. But at least wear a button-down shirt and slacks or something. Have a certain.
It's called respect. It's called respect when you're in the public. You just don't saunter around in the public in a sweatsuit. You get dressed. You look nice. You button your shirt. You're well groomed because it's having respect for the people that you're around. There's no respect for the public anymore by anybody in the public for the most part. Go ahead. I remember my parents, they told me, if you're going to go outside, Eric, you're going to have a nice shirt on, your pants are going to be clean, whatever. They wouldn't let me saunter out to school looking like I just rolled out of bed. And I had to make my bed, too. And if I didn't make my bed, it was a whipping. So there's no discipline anymore, especially among white people. And Fetterman illustrates it because he has no discipline either.
Okay, not lionize my late father, but as I said, he was career Air Force, and he spent over the last 20 plus years of his life as a civilian, 24, what it was, and you could tell he had a military background because if you looked at his closet, his shoes were neatly arranged, they're polished. He had a gig line. You could bounce a quarter off his bed, and
Are you facetious, or are you telling the truth?
Well, I'm telling the truth.
So you saw that?
Yes.
You saw that in his bedroom or whatever?
Yes. Because after he died, we had to go organize his stuff. And I'd been in his closet a few times.
Now, who are you talking about now? I missed who you're talking about.
My dad, my father.
Oh, your dad. Oh, pardon me. I thought you were talking about Fetterman. Yeah, Dad, you're okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was an E6, like a tech sergeant when he got out. And you could tell, even though he had been a civilian for decades, you could tell he had a military background because, as I said, his shoes were polished.
Yeah.
They're in a row. He could, there was never dust, a speck of dust anywhere. But it's just like, maybe I'm being nitpicky, but if you're
no, George, it's called discipline and respect for yourself. That's what it's called, and it takes effort and value and manhood.
Okay, well, there's a movie series called John Wick, and perhaps I should talk about this one of these days. But there's a line where Keanu Reeves is a hitman named John Wick or whatever his name is. That's just a pseudonym. And one of his superiors told him, how you do anything is how you do everything.
That's right. Very well said. Another Jesuit line put in there that's to entertain themselves with, knowing that the vast majority that is watching that is totally undisciplined, bereft of any desire to think and come to their own conclusions. So, yeah, very good. Well, George, we have to end this now. We're 5 minutes after the hour. So would you like to give your contact information? Did you cover everything you wanted to cover?
Oh, only about maybe half.
George, come on. Maybe I need to talk less. Maybe you need to say, hey, Brother Eric, I've got to make my point here. So would you please keep your mouth shut? So I'd be happy to do that if you just, let me know. So, because I want you to cover what you want to cover. So we'll be on Friday, and I guess we'll pick up where we left off today with what you wanted to cover. Is that good?
Fair enough. So I guess I should begrudgingly give my contact information.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so if people have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, please send me a line at George Widger, GEORWIDGER 1969 @gmail.com. If you want to cover a topic, and I know there are a number of issues that people would like me to address. This is a teaser. I got a request to talk about Star Wars, that whole franchise, for one of your listeners, and I got a couple of requests from
Brother Alex. So we'll do that for you, Alex, next broadcast. Go ahead.
Okay. Also, I got a request to talk about religious movements in the United States in the 19th century, specifically the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witnesses.
The birth of the cults. Yep.
Yes. Actually, I got that from that request from one of your listeners over in England, interestingly enough. And one of my long-standing requests is that I'll probably not on Friday, but talk about Ned Kelly, who was a 19th century Australian outlaw, who was basically, they call him basically the Australian Jesse James.
Ned Kelly. Okay. I'll be eager to hear that one, George. Okay, well, Brother George, thanks for being on with us today. Thank you for the contact information. Don't hang up until I'm finishing with my announcements or closures. So it's Brother Eric John Phelps and Brother George Widger today. Thank you for tuning in. I have a book, Vatican Assassins, Wounded in the House of My Friends. Just go to my website, vaticanassassins.org, and purchase the ebook. I hope to get it republished before the end of the year. And in the meantime, go to 24/7 World Radio. You can purchase my broadcasts for the various years back to 2013. And I think you'll enjoy them. I think they will be edifying for you. And lastly, appreciate your prayers, 2 minutes a day, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting, as we work out our salvation with fear and trembling, knowing that it's God who worketh in us to will and to do of his good pleasure. So I appreciate your prayers, and thank you for your support. You can send your support to RBT, P.O. Box 306, Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, 17073. Appreciate everything you give, because we'll put it right back into this and furthering the truth for the glory of God and for the exaltation of the risen Lord Jesus Christ. So until next time, which will be Friday with George, Maranatha, the Lord be with you.
Well,